We're hosting this forum at the front end to receive input and your questions from you, any questions that you have about the process, about how other organizations such as the TPACs integrate with our process, et cetera, to get your feedback about that whole thing. We will host at least one or two public forums at the tail end of the process when we actually make our recommendations. As I said, my name is Kevin Hegarty. I co-chair, I'm the Vice President and Chief Financial Officer for the university, and I co-chair this committee with the Provost of the university, Dr. Stephen Leslie. And I'd like to introduce the rest of our members just so you know who is up here. Our committee consists of 9 voting members and 3 non-voting members that principally serve in a support capacity, a resource capacity of the committee. The 9 voting members are Steve Leslie, who I introduced, myself, Victoria Rodriguez, Dean Deal, Randy Deal, the College of Liberal Arts, Hillary Hart, Professor Hillary Hart, Natalie Butler, Student Government President, and Carissa Nietzsche, Manny Gonzalez, from GSA, and Rosa Gutierrez. I thought Rosa was here. Okay. The non-voting members, the resource members, are the Vice Provost, Dan Slesnick, the Chief Budget Officer of the university, Mary Knight, and then John Dollard, the Vice Provost. What we'd like to do today is spend about 15, max 20 minutes having, first of all, Ms. Knight roll through and give you an idea of just a very macro picture of the budget of the university and a very macro picture of the forecast, the operating forecast for the university. That'll be followed then by a brief discussion of the TPAC process this year and how it differs from prior years, and that will be led by Carissa and Natalie. And then we'd like to spend the bulk of our time, reserve the bulk of our time, just taking questions, receiving comments from you in the audience. If you want to make a verbal comment or ask a question during the session when we open that up, we ask that you come to the microphone for the courtesy of everybody. If you would, introduce yourself and then ask your question or make your comment. I do believe that the Senate or the student government, one of the two, have set up, I think, a table outside. So if you run short on your time and have to leave, but you still want to leave a comment or ask a question, you're more than welcome to write it down. They've got paper down there, and we will review those and figure out how best to get back to you. So with that said, I'll turn this over to Ms. Knight.
All right, as Kevin said, I'm going to go through a quick run through of the overall budget and then longer-term budget forecast. So we look at, kind of think of our total budget in 3 categories. The total, roughly $2.3 billion budget is made up of the academic core, the academic enhancement, and self-supporting. The academic core is the instructional part of the budget and the administration and the support that go along with that. The academic enhancement is more things that enhance that academic core through research and endowments, other things like that. Self-supporting are the units that are basically almost like separate businesses. So they generate income and they provide their own expenses. This is a pie chart of our revenue sources for the budget. You can see in the upper right the state general revenue. So that's the percentage that we get from our state appropriations. It's currently about 13%. That has steadily declined over the years. Last year it was a little bit over 14%, so a small drop but significant. Our tuition is about 25% now, $567 million. You can see the self-supporting and the academic enhancement. We'll go into more detail on those in a few minutes. Other academic core are just other sources such as interest. We have in the academic core, the self-supporting units also provide some funding to the academic core to support their services. For example, They use our budget, they use our payroll services, so they provide about a 3.25% of their expenses to the academic core to help provide those services. So that's included in that academic core. Indirect costs, the 3% or $73 million. Indirect cost is funding mostly from federal research grants, but it provides the infrastructure and the support for those grants. I'm going to talk about AUF now, Available University Fund. There's 3 items there for AUF. The recurring portion of $156 million or 7% can be used for our recurring operations. It can be used for salaries, it can be used for any recurring type expense. The other 2 items there shows an AUF payout increase. That was for fiscal year 11-12 only. And so that $23 million was approved by the Board of Regents as an increase in the payout of AUF, and we can use it for this year only. So we wouldn't want to use that for things that are recurring expenses. Same with the next item, AUF non-recurring of $25 million. That was another non-recurring amount, so we can't use it for ongoing operations, but it was for specific programs that the Board of Regents approved, and all of those end this fiscal year in 11-12. Some of them were 3-year or 5-year, but they all end in 11-12. Just to kind of see a picture of AUF and how that works. So we have the Permanent University Fund. That is our lands in West Texas. There's leases and mineral rights on those lands, and that becomes our Permanent University Fund cash investment in the endowment. And that the return on investment is our Available University Fund. So that large Available University Fund is split between UT System and Texas A&M. They get 1/3, we get 2/3. Of our 2/3, part of it has to pay for the system costs for the chancellor and the staff that go along with that UT System. The PUF bonds, these are bonds that any campus in the UT System can participate in, and it's to help with new facilities or major renovations at those campuses. And then UT Austin gets roughly 45% of that 2/3. So the 45% of that 2/3 is about 30% of the AUF income for UT Austin. For us, for 11-12, I don't know if you can see it behind the heads, but it's $156 million recurring. So that was what was on the last slide. You may hear, we have a very large endowment. Well, the value of the PUF it varies as the market varies, but roughly $10 billion, and we get $156 million of that. And now to the expense side of the operating budget. Salaries, of course, is our largest part of the operating budget. It's about 53%. If you take this same pie chart for just the academic core, so just the instruction and the support part of the budget, it's over 60%, close to 65% of the budget is salaries. And then M&O, maintenance and operation, is just general operating expenses. We have scholarships of about 11%, utilities about 3%. The bottom 2 are capital and debt service, so those are related to facilities, buildings, renovations. And then we have other operating expenses that include things like equipment, academic and research, startup funds, library books are in there. So, a little bit. Yeah. This is just a little bit more detail about the academic core sources. So again, it's about $1.2 billion, and state general revenues $297 million. There's the AUF and the recurring, non-recurring part, tuition, indirect cost, and other. And then a more detailed explanation of how the AUF part of it is non-recurring. I think we covered most of that. The other category there is budget balances, some intellectual property income, and interest, and the administrative fee that I talked about coming from the self-supporting unit. Academic enhancement, again, is the part of the budget that provides extra excellence and enhancement funds in support of the instruction and research mission. So we have contracts and grants. Most of that is federal research grants. We have gifts of about $194 million. That includes the income off of the endowments. Now the endowments stay invested at UT System, the Timco investment company, but the income off of those endowments makes up part of those gifts, and that's funding that the colleges can use during the year. The $46 million is just other less restricted, I guess, funds for executive MBA programs, field trips, orientation. But the first two, the contracts and grants and gifts, it's really important to note, those are highly restricted funds. So if we get a research grant, we can only use those funds for that particular research grant. We can't spend it on anything else. Same with the gifts. There's very few of those that are unrestricted. For the most part, we have to use those gifts in the manner in which the donor identified them for. And then the last category is the self-supporting. So we have the auxiliary enterprises. These are the units that pay all of their expenses through their income, through their revenue. So athletics, about $133 million of that, housing and food, $75, and then you can see the others, conference center, Irwin Center, parking and transportation. There are some other units under other, that's the $104 million. Those are things like continuing education, performing arts center, UIL, wildflower center. So they may use some of our facilities. They're a little bit different enterprises, but the auxiliaries pay for all of their facilities, all of their utilities, all of their expenses. Some of the other ones use some of our facilities, but they still pay their own operating expenses. Okay, are there any questions about the overall budget? I was going to go into the forecast next. Yes.
I've always heard like sports pays for themselves, yet I'm seeing $133 million for intercollegiate athletics.
That is money. Intercollegiate athletics has a budget. They are part of the university, and so they do generate income of $133 million to pay their expenses. We do not transfer any academic core funds, any academic enhancement funds to their budget. So their ticket sales and all of their suites and everything pay for their expenses. Yeah, and good point, Kevin. They contribute the 3.25% to the academic core, as well as each year part of the trademark funds. So the money, when you buy t-shirts at the co-op and they have that collegiate licensing on there, part of that money goes back to the university, at least $1 million a year. And when they have a really good year, a championship, they give more. Last year when we had the budget reductions, they contributed $5 million to the university for that budget reduction. Anything else? Now we're going to talk about the forecast, so a little bit longer term view of where we are in our budget planning. Now this is early in the budget planning. We're just starting 11-12 fiscal year, but this looks forward from 12-13 to 2015-16. So the 11-12 is really what you looked at, just the academic core piece of the 11-12. Academic core is what we have some control over. So academic enhancement, we can't spend those funds for other purposes. Self-supporting units are kind of separate budgets. But this academic core is part of the instructional budget and how we fund the academic and research missions. And so the top category up there is state general revenue. We've left that flat over the period of time. Legislative session won't meet again until 13-14, so we have two budgets that are pretty static right now, 11-12 and 12-13. In the out years, we're still keeping those revenue estimates flat. We have heard that, it could be a difficult session next session as well, so we don't know whether this is a conservative estimate or whether it could get slightly better or it could get worse. But at this point, we're just keeping it flat. Flat rate tuition, that's what we're here to talk about today, is the tuition. So we've left that at the current rate. There are some little fluctuations for the set aside for students who have the Texas Tomorrow Fund. There's some off we have to our tuition for that, but other than that, it's pretty much flat. Student Activity Center, that was a student referendum to build the new Student Activity Center, so the student tuition pays $6.5 million a year towards that. And then the next 5 lines are the AUF. That's the Available University Fund we talked about. That first column shows the breakdown of the AUF, recurring and the non-recurring items. Those are all zero in the out years because those end in 11-12. The first line, however, where it says AUF system estimate recurring, you can see in 12-13 it jumps up quite a bit to $193 million. These projections are from UT System. They do our investing and tracking of the AUF, and so these are their estimates for the out years. Depending on the economy, that can fluctuate, and so that's what it is at this point, but those get updated every quarter, and so we make adjustments as we know that. Indirect costs, this is the funding from federal research grants for the most part. We're leaving that pretty flat at about $73 million. We did have a bump in that for 10-11 due to the stimulus funds, but we don't expect those to continue. In fact, those are all ending either this year or early in this year or last year they already ended. Other revenue, again, that's some interest and balances in the administrative fee. There's a separate line for balances, sorry, it wasn't in other revenue, but the balances for this year, we're using about $27 million in balances, but due to the budget reductions and changes that we predict over the next few years, we expect that to drop because we've already used some of those balances. So the budget source is just carried to the top here. Status quo uses, that's basically keeping our current operations going. That's what the level of expenditure would be. And then the next line is the net funds to allocate. So those are the funds that we have available to spend in each of those years. But once we pay the required fringe benefits, our estimates for fringe benefits for staff and faculty, and facility increases for new buildings or renovations, looks like the first year we'll have about $1 million, 12-13, and then after that we go in deficit of 15.6 to 30 million. And that's what I had to cover. If there's no questions, I can. You guys ready? Yes, and Natalie?
Okay, great. So Carissa and I are just going to give a quick overview of the TPAC process in general and where we go from here. Thank you all for coming. First of all, this is the first time TPAC has done a forum at the front end to try and gather feedback before we start deliberating as a group, so I'm really glad that all of you are here. The first thing is that the way that TPAC works is that we'll meet, we'll deliberate, and then we make a recommendation to the president of the university. He does with that, will take that or not, and then makes a recommendation to the UT system. And the system and the Board of Regents ultimately make the decisions about tuition. We've been given some guidelines that are applicable to all of the system schools by the system. And so I'm going to go over very briefly what those are, and those are guiding the tuition processes at all of the campuses right now. And we're lucky here at UT that ours is, UT Austin, as far as the system goes, ours is one of the most student involved. So there are more students on our committee than pretty much any other campus in the UT system. So we're really glad about that. But the two main guidelines are that any request for increased tuition has to be tied to 4-year graduation rates. Any request that's made by TPAC or by the president of the university to the system, there has to be justification based on increasing 4-year graduation rates. So that is sort of coloring all of the discussions that will be had among the colleges and the TPAC. The other thing is that the maximum that could be requested by any institution is directly tied to the consumer price index for the next 2 years. So that hovers a little over 2%. And so that is just something to keep in mind. That's something that is, a part of all of the conversations in all of the colleges and that TPAC will be having over the course of the next few months. Those are the directives from the system that we'll be working with. And I'm going to pass it on to Carissa to talk about the colleges and the TPACs.
This year the process has been a little different than ever before. Last year, College Tuition and Budget Advisory Committees, or CTBACs as we call them, were created in each college and school across the university, and they were charged with the task of gathering student feedback in that particular college and school on tuition and budget issues. This year we've been so fortunate that they've really driven the conversation with their deans and had a lot of awesome discussions in determining what it is that students really want to see in tuition in their particular college and school. So if you're a student in the audience, I sincerely hope that they reached out to you either through email, by survey, by forum, something of that nature to get your feedback on your particular college level tuition. So this year, kind of in that same vein, all of those various CTBACs will work with their deans in creating a proposal to submit to TPAC. So Natalie's going to talk a little bit about where we go from there in terms of what TPAC does with those proposals that are given by each college and school.
That's going to be a really great thing this year in that we're going to have specific sort of opinions from student groups in every college. And I know that those are very important to Carissa and I, but they're also important to the entire committee. We're all looking to see what students are thinking on these issues, what the needs are, what they want to see in their colleges, and what is going to help them meet what they want from their degree here at UT. So we're going to definitely take those into consideration. Even if a CTBAC and a dean might disagree on exactly what they want to see, we're going to take all of those things into consideration. I want to see what the CTBACs have to say, quite frankly, regardless of what other administration their colleges want to say. We're looking to hear from students. That's why I'm glad all of you are here. And so those will be taken into very serious consideration, and they're going to drive the rest of the conversations that TPAC is going to have from here on out. Those recommendations are due to TPAC on Friday, so if you're on a CTBAC, get excited. And those will be the main focus of our conversations from here on out up until we make recommendations.
So basically, I was just going to also go over a few things about how you can get involved with TPAC coloring this conversation as a student. We, of course, always have open emails, open access to us if you ever have comments or questions, concerns, thoughts that you'd like to pass on to us at a university-wide level. But throughout the audience, a lot of the CTBAC leaders are here, and all of them have open doors to you guys as well, and you're welcome to send them specific thoughts on college-level tuition and budget issues. Their focus will change a little bit since the tuition setting process for them is starting to come to a close, but they will be kind of gearing more towards budgeting, but they still have open ears regarding tuition issues in the college. They'll continue to have forums and continue to make recommendations to their dean on budget issues. So I strongly encourage you to definitely reach out to us if you have questions or concerns, but also to reach out to them if they're specifically at the college level. So I know that's kind of our vision for student involvement in the rest of this process. We'll of course always be at the table, continuing to advocate for students as much as we can, and there will be the culminating the culminating forum at the very end of this process where you'll still have your voices heard. So that's kind of more or less our plan for student involvement in the rest of this process. So thank you all.
Questions? Okay.
Great. This is the point where we welcome any feedback or any questions or anything that anybody has in the audience. And again, if you've got anything for us, we've got a microphone here. Please step up and introduce yourself and let us know. Can't believe it. Here. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Lucian. Tuition in Texas has quadrupled over the past 20 years. Tuition is going to increase this semester, and every time this happens, you're locking out low and moderate income families from attending these public institutions of higher education. What are you guys doing about that, about the low and moderate income people who are getting locked out of here?
Well, let me begin by reintroducing myself. I'm Steve Leslie. I'm the provost, and we're really working hard to try to address that issue. We're organizing around financial aid packages. We've just switched the reporting structure so that financial aid now reports through academic affairs, and we're going to start working on being very data-driven around that entire process. This is something we're very concerned about. really have a balancing act here of trying to minimize charges to students and families while at the same time managing the institution and making sure that as we go through this process that we do what a university like the University of Texas should do, and that is to make it a place where any person from Texas who wants to come here and who's prepared to enter the university from academic preparation should have the right to do that. This is a great public university, and students who have prepared themselves well deserve to come. So we're watching that very carefully. We're working hard to address that, and it's a really fair and important question.
I would add to that too, regarding your first comment. It is true that tuition at this institution, probably all institutions statewide, have gone up dramatically.
Inflation.
It's gone up dramatically, and it has gone up past inflation. And there were a number of reasons for that. A big driver of that reason beyond inflation is the fact that by comparison, when I finished my degree in 1979, my tuition, I think, was dramatically less than what you're paying. But that was in part because the state paid about 70 cents on the dollar of my education.
Yeah,
today the state is paying 13 cents on the dollar. Excuse me. Today the state is paying 13 cents of the dollar on your education. That difference has to come from somewhere. Now, a large portion of that has been picked up by people that donate to the university, or endowments have grown, etc. And we've tried to manage the expenses of the university at a level that it tries to minimize the increases. But we readily acknowledge that I'll say the total cost to attend, which includes fees, etc., have gone up dramatically.
I definitely understand that the more the state reduces our funding, we us students have to pay the rising costs. But whenever, I've gone to these higher education meetings and such, and all I hear from our administrators is, we did this to try to reduce costs, we did this to try to cut back. I'm not hearing y'all saying what I say, which is, stop cutting us. Y'all need to increase revenue. Y'all, I just keep hearing, we did this, we did that. I mean, I think you guys need to I think our administrators need to take a tougher stance, or else we're going to continue getting cut, and we'll get 0% funding. What happens at that point? Then we're just a private institution. Are y'all okay with this? Do we want this to happen?
No, we're not, of course. We work very hard to try to, and I think we all need to work together. And I think the students can be exceedingly helpful in messaging. You have a powerful voice in terms of the public perception of a place like the University of Texas and the legislative agenda. And of course, our students are wonderful. Every time we go to the legislature during the legislative sessions, our students are there in force with us. So, I hope we all agree that the reason that we're all here is because of the excellence of the university, and that's something we try to maintain, but at the same time making it as affordable as possible. And we work very hard to try to send the message to the public and to the legislature and to the outside that this is a place that deserves to be funded in ways that are appropriate for its world-class status. And that's a message we need to continue to convey. And it's not just the administration. I think it's all of us as we go forward.
Yeah, I would also say that don't confuse the assumption on flat general revenue with the belief that doesn't mean that we as an administration, you as students, and then other interested supporters of the university won't be down at the legislative session telling our story and arguing for greater funding to not just this institution, but higher education within Texas. We don't just roll over and just assume that that's going to be the case. But it is hard to look at the history of what has happened over the last 30 years and not believe that we're probably not going to go back to the times of the 1970s when I was here and we had that kind of support, unfortunately, and we need to plan for that. We're also, and I think you've seen with our president, trying to be much more creative about alternative revenue sources. And for example, you've heard about the Longhorn Network. It will raise a substantial sum of money. Unfortunately, in the scheme of things, it's not the only thing that needs to be done, but it's a great example of how we're trying to leverage the brands of the university and monetize that for the benefit of the educational component of the institution.
Right, with the Division of Housing and Food Services having to pay $70,000 so they can get the Longhorn network in the dorms. I mean,
well, there's actually a much more different story to that. The alternative is to look at what Housing and Food pays for cable service versus what they would pay if they were a typical customer. Even with the increase to carry the channel, you're still paying less than $7 a month for the channel versus if you were a Grande Communications subscriber, you pay $21 a month. It's still a very hefty discount.
Hi, I'm Natalia Rivera, and my question is, how much do you guys estimate the tuition will actually go by, percentage-wise? She said it would be capped at 2 or something %. And will that be any different between undergrads and graduate students?
As far as how much will go up, I really can't give you an answer right now. This is the beginning of our deliberative process. We're waiting for those recommendations to come from the colleges and the TPACs before we really start having a conversation about actual numbers. That's why we want to have this, because if any of you have comments on what you think about any of those numbers, we'd love to hear it, because I don't have an answer there yet, and we won't have one for a while, because there's a lot of conversations that need to be had and a lot of things that need to be heard. Like I said, that was a cap. That is the highest. As far as the difference between graduate and undergraduate, I think one of y'all can probably answer that one better. I think there is a difference there as far as what they're looking for.
Well, what we've heard at this point is that for graduate education, for out-of-state students, for non-resident students coming into the university, we'll be allowed to go up a little bit more, maybe a percentage or so, but not very much.
Hi, my name is Elizabeth Welch. I'm the treasurer for the Graduate Student Association of the History of Art. I don't know if anybody else from College of Fine Arts is here, but I haven't heard about this College of Fine Arts recommendation committee. I realize there's been some turnover with the deans and issues and that sort of thing. There's a committee going on right now for the dean of the College of Fine Arts. But I'm going to talk about numbers now that you guys probably never deal with, which is in the thousands rather than the billions. So currently the in-state tuition for the art history graduate is about, for 9 hours for full tuition, is $4,932, whereas the liberal arts is $2,903. And we don't use the resources that, say, the music students or the studio students get to use, which I believe is the reason that we have a higher tuition rate. I was wondering if you can talk about, is there any way to deal with this? You know, it might not mean a lot to you guys, but that $300 means a lot to the people in my department.
Well, let me take a shot at it. I think that what you're talking about is a tuition setting process that has evolved and has just got to this point over many years. And decision making each year to take into needs, in this case at the College of Fine Arts level, and the institutional process doesn't differentiate beyond the college and school level. So that's the reason that you're having differences in what's paid across colleges is because the instructional delivery of the College of Fine Arts is a little more expensive than it is because of the individualized instruction and the performance areas and the things that go on in the educational process in the arts compared to the liberal arts, as you gave as the other example. So these are policies and decisions that are made at an institutional level. They're broken down by the college and school, but not beyond that. And so, for example, the tuition that is paid by students in engineering is much higher than you pay, so there are these differences that have been kind of developed from tuition differentials over the years.
I know we realize that, but there's been a move in the department recently to separate the art and the art history because they're very different fields and with very different requirements. And we have more of a budgetary need, like, say, history rather than like art history. And I think what frustrates us is we are not allowed to use the resources that they get to use. For example, the pottery studio, let's say. We can't just go in there and use that resource, but I'm paying for that resource. And unfortunately, because of funding, a lot of us aren't getting help in paying that resource.
Elizabeth, I'd be happy to send you the information for the Fine Arts Council TPAC, and I'd love for this to be something that maybe they include in their recommendation or something to their dean, a discussion that they have later. So I'll definitely send you that information later tonight. So thank you.
Hi, I'm Kristen Thompson, 4th year civil engineer, University of Margaret, student government. Has this committee considered a consistent tuition rate where students' tuition wouldn't rise after they've been admitted into the university? And if so, how would that affect the budget in the future years?
We have considered that from time to time. Actually, I think since we began this in 2004, 2005 kind of time frame, it's come up every year. The challenge that we have is that there's so many unknowns that we have a difficult time forecasting. For example, state general revenue. It's very dramatically over that period of time. If we could bring some surety over, let's say, a 4-year period of time in clumps to what that funding might be, I think it would be very realistic, and we'd love to be able to say, here's your rate, and your rate is fixed for 4 years. But absent that, if we went to a rate that said, we promise you this rate for 4 years, our concern would be we'd have to increase it so much to make sure that we were conservative enough that whatever happened, the institution wasn't harmed, that it would be unfair. We would risk dramatically overcharging students. And so then we got into the scenario of, well, okay, then if we overcharge, then just credit it to the next group, or if you undercharge, charge it to the next group. And again, here again, you're introducing huge volatility, so we just haven't been able to come up with a good answer. We have taken a hard look at those institutions that have done this. And I will tell you that while you won't read about them yet, there are some financial disasters waiting to be disclosed in newspapers. And there are also those scenarios where they just recovered on the next group of students, and their students asking, wait a second, why did my tuition go up far more than, inflation or anything like that? We'll continue to look at it. And that's also, by the way, a discussion that we've invited many times with legislative members, and I think it is getting some traction. They understand that if their component is not predictable in any major way, it doesn't have to be precise, that it introduces this scenario so that they can bring some stability. I think, maybe over time we'll be able to come to some kind of an agreement that says, okay, we can go to, because we'd love to go to something like that.
This is kind of anecdotal, but not that long ago I had a very, very long conversation with a friend who is at an institution that does that. And we couldn't come up with a good answer as to which one is better, because he sort of realized that they were projecting 4 years out what they would be needing and charging that the whole time. So the total amount he was paying for his education was higher than what the university might have actually needed at the time, but then it was more predictable than what we were doing. And so there was a give and a take in both. And this was just a friend of mine as a fellow student leader at another campus, and like I said, we came to no conclusion. I think it is still a good conversation to have, but others, students at institutions sort of feel that. The students at institutions that do that, sort of that, consistent tuition for 4 years have similar, questions whether or not that's good. And so there's just a lot to consider in that.
I will say too, and this doesn't help anybody in this room, but it may, well, except unless they're parents in this room with young children, but it was this very concept that the legislature was trying to target with the Texas Tomorrow Fund, and now the new fund is the Texas Promise Fund, which allows parents to buy units, semester credit hours, of future education, and lock in at today's rate no matter when they use those units.
I guess in addition to that, have you all as a committee or us as a university tried to, I guess, persuade the legislature to be more predictable with their revenues to the university?
Could you please help us with that?
Thank you, sir.
of the student, and I have a question about hidden costs of the education, hidden in the tuition. What I mean, a few months ago, my daughter forwarded an email to me, which said that university is including in her tuition almost $400 for less fortunate, students. And I want to know how many more that kind of hidden, charges are included in tuition, for how long it was taken, because then I discovered that just the Texas Congress pushed the university to inform people about it. Before, I assume it was taken just totally in, people were kept dark about it. And how you guys feel that this is fair? She's taking loan because we cannot afford it to pay for her tuition. And $400 is taken, so her loan has to be higher just to share somebody, so maybe, maybe she should just take a loan and just pass that money to somebody else. I mean, this is how you feel about it. I mean, do you have an answer? There's any more of that kind of hidden costs?
I'll take a shot at this, and that is, I guess my brief response would be from 2004 on, which was the point that the legislature deregulated tuition and ceded control of that, or that decision, to the Board of Regents. It also passed a law that requires that any increase in tuition, of that amount of increase, 20% be set aside. Actually, it's 15% for a scholarship program, 5% for another, they call it the Be On Time program, but for an undergraduate, 20% be set aside for financial aid for needy students, and that's subject to debate as to what is a needy student, but generally our financial aid department makes that determination. But I guess my short answer would be, it's the law. It doesn't matter what we think. We have been following the law, as have all other institutions, public institutions in the state of Texas, since the law was passed. Now, there were legislative members was it last session or the prior session, that decided we don't necessarily care for this law, but they forced disclosure of the amount that was being set aside, presumably because they felt like they couldn't get the law changed to just do away with it. But as a public institution, we have no choice, regardless of what we think about it, but to set it aside.
So you're saying that this is Texas state law, which is put that contribution in voluntary tax on the student, just kind of, they don't pay for this, whatever, I don't know, for how many years after they finish school, just to help somebody else?
Yes, that is correct.
How fair is that? Somebody is taking student loan when other students are getting grants or scholarships from university, the same university, and they not, getting graduate and they don't have any debts. How is that fair to the other students?
I think that's a great question to ask your state representative, because they're the ones that make the laws. And
is university UT has any, power to change that law, or what university is doing regarding that?
What we are allowed to do by law is to inform and serve as a resource to legislative members. We are not, by law, allowed to express our opinions on these topics. When I get up in front of the legislature, or any of us get up that work for the university to give testimony, we have to check a box that says we are not for, we are not against. We are simply serving as a resource to the legislature. But you, as a parent or a private citizen or students that have an opinion, certainly can express their opinions at those hearings, as well as contact your state representative and let them know what your opinion is of the law, or if you have questions about the fairness.
Let me add to that what I've seen, I've been in the provost office for 5 years, and over that time, what I've seen is a process where this university works very hard to be transparent, to be completely open and transparent. So that you will see what the charges are. There are no hidden fees. Many years ago, there were fees to support the laboratory needs, the special educational needs that families would find out about after they paid tuition, and then there were additional fees that were required to be paid as well. All of that is no longer the case. That when students and families see a tuition bill for the University of Texas at Austin, that is what you pay. And that transparency, I think, is what we need to continue to work on. And none of us want to hear stories like you're talking about. I mean, I think that the work that we do to analyze data in the Provost office shows very clearly that there are huge financial stresses in families trying to pay for higher education to benefit their children's future lives. And there are very, very large numbers of parents who are dealing with the same kinds of circumstances that you're dealing with. And it is this balancing act that I was talking about before that we need to attend to, because the fact that is a son or daughter?
A daughter.
A daughter. Congratulations for her being here. It's really hard to get into this university, so congratulations for that.
Thank you. Can I add to that?
Yes.
To your answer. Honestly, I think UT should do something about that matter, because my daughter feels like it's penalized. Because we are middle class family and both working, she has to take student loan. And this year, because of the cuts in the budget, her grants were revoked. She didn't get them. So we have to pay additional money, and she is paying, on top of that, she will be paying for quite a few years for graduation from that university. And unfortunately, because that information wasn't transparent, there were other choices for her to go to another state or even country, which are not charging or penalizing, family members because they're middle-class family. So it's hard for me. I have concern about her values, or values for, value of that university. I'm sorry because of that.
Well, I understand, and I wish we all do, wish that there could be more that we could do. What the story you're telling is repeated over and over and over in families who are trying to cover the cost of higher education. I will say that the 4 years that your daughter will spend here and then graduate will be worth it. And it's a great university, and it's the responsibility for all of us to make sure it stays strong while we're working to minimize and be as efficient as possible. We must stay strong so that the degree, when your daughter graduates from the University of Texas at Austin, she will always have it. There are many people in this room, including people on the front row here, who went through the same kinds of things while getting their educations, including paying back loans. When you look back on it later, it's a really, really good investment, and I truly hope that you will see that, and your daughter will find that as she continues on through her life. But let me just say that it's this way throughout the United States, and this is one of the reasons why higher education has the issues to deal with that it's dealing with. That is the middle class that is getting hit so hard with the costs of higher education. And I really wish that our support from our legislatures and people who could support us in stronger ways would do that, so you don't have to pay so much.
There's quite a bit of misinformation out there as to what the latest round of cuts entailed and how that affects the university. And I know for all of us it's extremely difficult to understand why the cuts, the rise of tuition costs. But if you guys let us know and give us like a rundown as to what you guys are facing in this new round of cuts, maybe we'll be able to understand better your perspective and what you're dealing with. Because I know it's probably not easy on your side either to sit there and listen to all of us complain about how difficult it is to pay for tuition today.
Well, let me say we want to be here. You know, we need to be here. We understand. The reason that we're here at the beginning of this process is to listen to you so that we can try to be together as we work our way through this, and to organize through the students so the students can be engaged, deeply engaged, down to every student if we can get it that way, through the TPAC committees, which I think are just wonderful that we have them organized this year. Well, I forget what I was going to say now, but I'm glad we're here. What was your question? The budget cut. I am getting older, and I'm losing a little bit of my... So, our budget cut this year from the legislature for the 2-year period was $92 million. And that's, per year, that's $46 million recurring. We will not make that up with tuition increases, and we won't try to make that up with tuition increases. What we'll try to do with the tuition policy advisory committee's work with the leadership of our students and the administrators here is to cover the necessary costs so that we keep the university strong, and at the same time remember the message that we're hearing from our parents here, that we've got to take care of the efficiencies and be the best university that this state can have. And we are one of the finest universities in the United States, but also one of the most affordable, and we are also that. It is a very efficient, affordable university in the context of the quality of education you get and the size and magnitude of the university. But the cut we had was a big one. It was $92 million over 2 years, $46 million recurring.
The TPAC, I'm Randy Deal, just to remind you, Dean of Liberal Arts. The Liberal Arts TPAC group began meeting right at the time the College of Liberal Arts was dealing with its share of these cuts. And I have to say the role that they played was extremely important, very constructive. It influenced the decisions that I ultimately made as to where cuts would be allocated. TPAC and Liberal Arts has continued to play a very important role. 2 days ago, they presented their recommendations. These recommendations followed several meetings that members of TPAC had with me and with my assistant deans. Very good discussions. We intend to implement all of the recommendations that TPAC has made. We'll be actually adding some additional points, but this is by way of emphasizing how important the TPAC process is. Certainly it is in the College of Liberal Arts.
My name is Gwendolyn, but everybody just called me Gwen, and I'm the newly elected TPAC for the School of Social Work. And I guess I'm on both sides of the spectrum. I have a daughter. Well, she didn't choose to come here. She goes somewhere else. So we pay for her to go there, and I decided to come back to school, so we pay for me to go here. So with the increase in tuition at the federal level and the budget cuts, I'm affected on both ends. And so with an increase of tuition, this is my thing, is if tuition keeps increasing, but also everything else increases too, because we pay for parking, we pay for printing, we pay for everything, nothing's free here. And I would hate to think that I got the degree from one of the top schools and now I can't afford to live, because everything here is costs. And so when you increase tuition and these other things because of the budget cuts, I just like to see, know how you could work equally across the budget to where I'm not being affected to pay $600 a semester for parking.
Well, let me talk about more about the budget cuts and refer to what you're discussing there, and to make the point that any tuition, and this just reinforce what Carissa and Natalie said at the beginning, and that is that any increase in tuition that we will put forth to the president will be focused on what we need to do to maximize efficiencies for the four-year graduation rate. Time to degree, with the idea that the better we are at moving students through, the less money parents are going to pay, because they'll graduate sooner, and the students, upon receiving their degrees, will be in the workforce and start making money. Right now, our four-year graduation rate is at 51%. Our five-year graduation rate is at 76%?
5 years is 76.
76%. So, you see what I'm getting at? If we, and the president, you may have heard his State of the University address, the president's charge to the campus, to the provost's office, and to the deans, is to work to a four-year graduation rate of 70%. What that means is less tuition that you pay. You know, if you can move that 5-year 75% graduation rate to doing that in 4 years, you got a full year. That's what the tuition increase is going to focus on, and only creating efficiencies so that we can have the same quality or better quality education going through the pipeline of the educational process, and having the outcome be that we move students through the university more quickly.
And the note about student services, I, as long as 4 other students, sit on the Student Services Budget Committee, which is a committee that doles out a chunk of money towards student services. SSBC, that's the acronym we use for it, was hit with the same round of budget cuts as the rest of the institution a few years ago. And so that's when there were some increases in those costs to student services. This year, SSBC will be taking a very serious look at a lot of the things that we're funding, how we can maximize those and try and keep costs low or zero to students. We're going to be having a forum a lot like this sometime in the near future once we sort of know what our pot of money is going to look like for the next 2 years. But that's something we're taking a very serious look at. We want to make sure that, you know, especially those essential services that keep students able to be in school, keep you healthy while you're here, all of those things, able to get to campus, are huge priorities, and we keep that cost as minimal or none as whenever possible.
Hi, Michael Redding, School of Information. I'm actually our TPAC chair. And, you know, as Natalie was saying, as Chris was saying, you know, 4-year graduation rates, it's kind of bad. I mean, I graduated my undergrad here in 4 years, but not everybody can. I understand that. But sort of one thing that concerns us over the School of Information is we are, you know, we have no undergrads. We have an undergrad minor, but they don't major. And we're a 2-year grad program. It's 90% of our students, and about 10% is PhD students. And the feedback that I've gotten over and over again from our students is, you know, what about us? You know, we don't have a 4-year graduation rate. It just doesn't exist for us because if you're doing it in 4 years, you're doing it wrong. So it's, we're concerned that, you know, like what happened the last time we raised tuition, that it all goes back to the undergrads here on campus and we don't really get much back. And that's sort of been the feedback that I've gotten over and over again, much like y'all are getting now.
Let me ask you a question. How do you like your building, and how do you like your space?
Oh, we love it.
Okay.
Believe
where
me,
do you think
love that part.
Do you know where you were before?
Oh, yes.
Okay. Where do you think all that came from? That came from support from the administration, so you would have facilities. How do you think we paid for that? You didn't pay for it. We covered it at cost from the institution's budget. You have one of the top high school programs in the United States, and a facility and an environment, so that as you go through and you pay what is really an efficient tuition. I know your circumstances really well. You are really low compared to other places. You are in a place where you have an incredible facility that the institution recently provided for you. It is one of the nation's top high schools, and when you get finished, you're going to pay a minimal amount of money in the context of the value of the education you're getting in the space that you're getting compared to what your high school students were doing 5 years ago.
Right, and sort of I can't deny that because I mean, like I said, I've seen those numbers. Of the top 10, we have the cheapest, and even after our proposed increases, they'll still be the cheapest.
Yeah.
But sort of our concern, and again, I'm of two minds on this because I am a student, but I also see these numbers, is we found it's gotten to a point where it's not sustainable without tuition increases.
Yeah.
And even if we do the maximum increase this year, we still will not have enough to cover it. And sort of our concern is, we'll have these really nice buildings, but we won't have any professors to teach us. And it's not even so much tenured faculty, it's folks that have been out in the field doing it, which for a master's program is really beneficial for us.
Yeah.
And so I guess sort of my concern is, I believe me, four-year graduation rates are really important. But it's sort of what we all make sure to do so that the grad students don't sort of get, left over in the side so the undergrads can get on out.
Oh no, well, the graduate programs, we're also gathering data on the graduate programs because what we want to do is monitor, be data-driven with the graduate programs to where we're going to monitor placement. We want to know where graduates are going, whether you're going into top-tier institutions from this top-tier institution, those kinds of things. So we're really going to watch that. Okay. But the issue so no, we're not going to just use the money we get from the graduate school to, quite the contrary. I think the size and scale of the undergraduate program really is beneficial in the context of helping the graduate program, quite the reverse. Let me just comment also about your point that I think is a really good one, that under any circumstance in the United States, this tuition-driven higher education process in the face of minimal and declining support from states is not sustainable. This is something, we're a member of the AAU, the Association of American Universities. The top 61 universities in the United States are members of that. These are public and private universities. And this is a topic that we talk about a lot. A big concern about the long-term sustainability of the excellence, not only the University of Texas, but University of Michigan, University of California, Berkeley, University of Virginia. All these wonderful public institutions that, by the way, graduate 80% of the students in the United States. It's not in the privates, it's in the big, strong, research-oriented publics like this one. And this is a real issue that we all need to be concerned about, and the public needs to be concerned about, is that the driving force for the excellence of the economy in the United States is driven by these big, powerful universities that train the next generation of innovators and thinkers.
You cannot, judge the efficiency of the university by how fast the students are, achieving, the goal.
Well
I would judge the efficiency of the university by, for example, 2 years ago there was a program of upgrading the lights, which is supposed to be much more efficient. I know that the company was hired, charged university, obscene amount of money, and I know that guys who are working in the, maintenance, they said that, we could change those for the fraction of that money, we could change those light bulbs. Another example, but the building is just, decision is that the building will go down. What we do? We put the fire safety, systems and invest in a whole bunch of money to the building, which is already made decision that will be, just leveled. This is, so I'm asking about because again, I'm not sure if I understand, the logic, behind the efficiency factors.
Well, I think your point is really good. We do not want to force students through, a forced march through the university is not the intent. But I hope you would agree that if we do what we need to do to maximize efficiencies of our class offerings, so that your daughter will be able to take classes when she's supposed to take them, that the efficiencies are there so that to the extent that she goes through, she's able to go through efficiently. That's kind of what I'm talking about, not a forced march to finish. But at the same time, We want to make sure that there is a purpose to our educational mission, and that for students who like to be in Austin and want to just kind of hang around for a while and take up spaces and increase costs, that we deal with that side of it too, because there is that side of it.
So the graduate students will probably face a 1% increase difference. Is that correct?
In terms of the guidance that we've gotten for the purpose of the work of the committee, that's the guidance that we've got at the beginning. So we'll have to see what happens with the input from the colleges and schools and from the graduate school coming in, and how the committee moves. But that is the guidance that we've gotten, that for graduate education and non-resident students, that they will consider requests. But it all has to be focused on the four-year graduation.
Yeah, so relating that back to the four-year graduation thing, how are graduate students, I mean, how do you justify that 1% increase over the undergraduate when graduate students do not graduate?
Oh, I see. Well, that's actually a good point. So let me try to be more precise. The four-year graduation rates is for undergraduates. The extra percentage, maybe this is what you were getting, the extra percentage for that we're authorized to consider, that the regents will consider for graduate education, is more pertaining to the cost of graduation. So not for graduation. Sorry.
Not for our
Sure.
Yes.
Okay. Really sure? I had a couple questions. And first of all, thank you for hosting this forum before the TPAC meetings get started. I really appreciate that, and I hope it adds a good dimension to the future discussions. I was curious about, we were looking at a pie chart of the university's current revenues. 25% of it currently comes from tuition. I'm just kind of curious how the size of that chunk has changed over the years, like maybe perhaps where it was 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 25 years ago. I'm sure it was bigger back then. I'm wondering how much.
I don't know the exact amount off the top of my head, but if you'll give us your email address, we'll be happy to send you the data going 30 years back if you'd like. But the answer is, 50 years back, whatever you want, we can get it for you. The answer is, it's been a growing fraction. That has been the highest growing fraction, and it corresponds with the state fraction, which has been a diminishing fraction.
Now, as a percentage of total budget, state support currently sits at about 13–14%, correct? Okay, and that's obviously much less than in the past as well. I'm curious though about the figure for inflation-adjusted dollars and how that number has either increased or decreased or remained constant over the years. Is the state still giving us about the same amount of money, inflation-adjusted?
No, and the answer, again, I don't know the dollars off the top of my head, but we do have a schedule on this. But if you look at, say, 10 years ago, what the state put in per student versus this year, what the state puts in per student, what you'd see is actually this year, it's lower than what it was even 10 years ago. On an inflation-adjusted basis per student, yeah.
Per student?
Per student.
Okay, so, but as far as the total amount just simply allocated to the university, has that amount decreased as well?
That amount is probably, well, it's probably up. Yeah, it's probably up on a non-inflation adjusted basis, but you have to normalize it on some basis. We normalize it on a student basis, which is roughly a surrogate for how the state allocates those dollars, which are actually on a semester credit hour kind of basis.
Okay. I guess where I'm looking to steer it is to see, like, we're at a $2.2 billion operating budget currently, and how has that increased pretty dramatically as well over the over the past 1, 2, 3 decades?
It has, but what you'll see is that the increases are principally in the non-academic. It's principally in areas like research. I mean, we're a $650 billion research enterprise, which again is not driving tuition rates. But yeah, the growth is there. The growth are in our auxiliary business operations, athletics, parking and transportation, housing and food. Those are dramatically larger operations than they were 10 or 20 years ago.
Very cool. Thank you for all that y'all do. I know it's not an easy job. My final comment is just a comment, and it's about as simple as it is predictable. You know, as far as the increases in budget. You know, I know that y'all go forward. You know, keeping the interest in mind of making sure that students incur as little of those types of increases as possible.
That's right. And if you would you be sure to get to me your email address, because I'd like to share the data with you. Sure.
Hi, my name is Jacqueline.
And I'm Ashley.
We're in the School of Nursing, and our question is relating again to the efficiency in 4 years type of thing. And what's going on in the nursing school right now is that, I don't know if you're aware of what's going on there, but how it works is that you apply to pre-nursing, and then you have to reapply into upper division. And what's happening now is that when I'm a junior, she's a freshman. When I applied 3 years ago to UT, they told me that about 75% of students who get into pre-nursing, if they made their grades well enough, that they would most likely get into upper division. But what's happening now is that my year, I'm a junior, we're all just now starting upper division, and only about 45 to 50% of us were accepted because our school could not afford a teacher, or 2 teachers. And so our question is that how this efficiency plan in 4 years is almost impossible, and I have friends that are going to graduate in 6, 7 years from a nursing school that's top 10 in Texas that says that we have an upper hand because we can graduate in 4 years. Well, I'll graduate in 4 years, but what about the other 50% that didn't get in, that have to start next semester, and if they don't get it again, the next semester? So an efficiency thing with our school, it seems almost impossible. So.
And from my standpoint, I mean, clearly I applied to the University of Texas nursing program because of its great just reputation across the country as just an outstanding nursing program. And hearing stories of girls who have applied 3, 4 times and they're on their 6th or 7th year here at the university with kind of these classes that they're paying for, and that in order to fill these, you know, semester gaps of just this semester that they're not in their J1 or their upper division of nursing. And it's making me a little nervous just coming in as a freshman thinking, well, 55 or so students are getting into the nursing program when there's, you know, a little bit over 100 of us applying every year, and it's just, you know, how the efficiency of a 4-year thing is going to affect us.
Yeah, we share this with pharmacy, by the way. You know, pharmacies in that same situation where there are many hundreds of big pharmacy students that apply to get into a limited, kind of capped professional school situation. You know, the reality is that that's what we have here. That in order to get into a capped school, a professional school like that, it is very, very competitive. That's just the circumstance that we have. And I know that there are circumstances where students apply repeatedly to get in, and some don't get in. That creates a really awkward situation. So we're actually looking at how to change all of that as we go forward.
Well, also, a very large concern is that, like, the people who don't get in, they're reassured that they'll be put on the top of the list, it'll be fine the next semester. But then you have, because I guess pharmacy too and nursing are such like stringent course tracks, that there really are no courses to take when you reach a gap year. And then, like, I have friends that are in these random electives, they're paying full tuition for classes that honestly, I mean, they're interesting and I'm glad the university has those classes, but they really don't need them. And it's just delaying the process even more than paying full tuition. So what are they supposed to do? Like take a gap year and come back later? So is there a way to alter tuition to say if some of these professional SQL students, could they take just 2 courses and have a lower tuition? Like, is that possible? And is it possible? I mean, I guess that's my question.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure I have a good answer for you.
Is this a comment?
Yeah, well, and the professional programs are, they're very, top tier. And so many students come into the university attempting to get kind of like medical school. It's very competitive to get into medical school. It's that same kind of concept. Let me also comment on the money side of this that you were referring to, and just point out that another aspect of the limited state funding for your nursing program is that its funding is very significantly lower than funding comparable programs in medical schools. Where the academic programs are in a different formula, and so the money that your nursing school, even though it's the top nursing program in Texas, it is also the lowest funded from the state legislature. So if we were to, and this is something we've been working on for the past several years, is to try to get that changed so that this top tier nursing school will have funding appropriate to its excellence and in a competitive way to nursing programs that are in health science and nursing.
I mean, one of the best qualities of the school itself is the fact that I think it's like they try to have this 1 to like 10 or 11 student-teacher ratio, which is great. But when you can't afford to have 2 or maybe 3 professors and you only have 20 students in the class, obviously that kind of knocks us down a few notches in getting into the school and things like that.
I know one thing that was brought up by UT Nursing Student Association and their CTPAC was that exact issue, and I think they're probably talking about the same 2 professors that y'all are, so I know that should be included in their proposal. I'm not sure, how much can be done about it, but it is something that they also are feeling the pain on and taking into consideration.
Thank you so much.
Good luck.
Hi, I'm Andrea, and I'm an academic advisor in McCombs and also a graduate student. So I just thank you for being here today, and I want to just encourage any thoughts that students have on how to communicate to all the other students how funds are used, because I hear it from students who say, well, I've never met with anyone in your dean's office or any of the advisors. Why am I paying fees that say advising fees? Maybe they would graduate more timely if they did, but I also hear from parents who feel frustrated with the fees, and then as a staff member, I hear initiatives, and I feel that I'll probably be tasked with some of them. So I just encourage everyone to brainstorm the best ways to communicate to students so that they can become maybe more involved in like the Invest in Texas campaign that started last legislative session, and then that more people will be in something like this. So thank you for your time.
Sharing how student money is spent is always a big thing we're working on. And there's a representative of student government who's sitting over there, who that's her big initiative this year is coming up with a good way to share where tuition money goes. It's something we're always working on. We want to make sure we're sharing accurate information, so we're going to spend a lot of time on the front end figuring out how exactly to share that information. But it is something that we're working on, so if you have any ideas, do let us know.
I'd just like to make a brief comment, I guess, on behalf of my constituents. I've spoken to a lot of students, mostly minority students, on the topic of your 4-year graduation plan, and I just kind of want to discourage you from making that one of the biggest things that you face the tuition increase consistency or whatever on, because I've spoken with a lot of students who do want to take advantage of the courses that are offered at this university, the opportunities that are provided here. Students who want to support the new Department for African and African Diaspora Studies by taking those courses, not necessarily focusing on their, degree coursework, but which may, in fact, leave them here for 5, hopefully no more than 5 years. But I just wanted to comment on that. Try to discourage the tuition discussion from being based on the four-year graduation rate, because a lot of students do benefit a little bit more when they spend a little more time here. Access to other students, through organizations, different academic opportunities, so.
Yeah, I think we all agree with you, and again, it's the guidance that we're getting in terms of what we'll be allowed to consider that's driving. It's not because we want to go in this direction. But another aspect of this is that students who come in, just as our nursing students we're talking about, sometimes it takes a while to get into the program, or even to get into something that students try and it doesn't work and they want to change majors, those kinds of things. So again, it's to the point to the parents that we were referring to before, that we don't want to engage in a forced march. We just want to create efficiencies, and we'll be looking at this process, looking at four-year graduation rate funds that we need, because that's what we've been given the authority to consider.
As a fifth-year student by choice, I completely understand. I think the gap I think we're trying to bridge is the student that wants to get out in 4 years but doesn't have the resources to do it right now. I think that at least is what I'm focusing on, because I know there are a lot of students who couldn't get a class that they needed, didn't have the opportunity to see an advisor, didn't have the right interactive degree auditing system to get the info they needed. Those are the things where we can bridge the gap between people who are striving to get out in 4 years. But like I said, I took a fifth year purely because I wanted to, and so I'm with you. I don't think that we should be forcing people to get out in the amount of time.
And then also to that point, have you all been discussing the availability of summer coursework? Because I know that's something a lot of students take advantage of, the courses that are offered in the summer often would be.
John Dollard's been working on that. So, you have a microphone, John?
Yeah, well, we've been trying to enrich the summer offerings to induce the, we've been trying to enrich the summer offerings and to induce the colleges to do that. We've made monetary incentives for them to try to think of tempting courses and to listen to students about what sort of courses they would like to have and so forth. And we have seen, in a couple of cases, we've seen natural sciences and communication in particular started delivering a lot more semester credit hours during the summer under this program. Now, we think other colleges will follow suit, but we need input from students on what they would like to have, okay? And I think if you'll tell your own college what sorts of things you would like to have, there's a reasonable chance they'll go out and try and do something about it.
Just as a time check, we've got about 3 more minutes. I know Gwen has another question.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask a question in response to, because in the social work, you also have to apply to the pre-major and then apply to the upper division, which is a lot of essays. But when you originally get accepted, you don't, it's not really said. And so I think for parents that are paying tuition and kids and they're paying for them to be here, and now they're not taking any of the classes, and so now we're just stretching out this and they can't get in, it's affecting like parents who actually pay tuition, and you can't come home and tell me you can't get into a class and I don't get upset. You know what I mean? Especially if I'm paying $6,000 a semester for you to be there, you better get in the class. And so I'm just concerned that like not being able to get into those is almost like trickery, because maybe they could have went somewhere else. I don't know, I'm just asking.
Well, that's right, and that's the four-year graduation rate efficiency work that we're working on for those kinds of issues. Now, another thing is that we need to all perhaps chat about a little bit is the fact that by law, when we admit students, the student is in the, I guess it's what, the top 8 or 9% now of the graduating class in high school. They come into the university, but many times they don't come into the majors that they want, into their first or second choice. And it's really hard because of the requirements of the law for us to properly advise students about what they're going to be able to do when they get here. That's a very significant issue for us. About 25% of the students who come in under these circumstances into the university don't get into their first or second choices as majors, but they're accepted by virtue of the law. And that's a tough situation for us to deal with. We'd like to have a better process for advising students, but we're kind of hampered by the requirements of the law.
Hi, I'm Crystal. I am the liberal arts representative that Natalie mentioned earlier. I actually am also kind of concerned with the course offerings and the four-year graduation rate thing. I know that as a freshman during orientation, I was an orientation advisor this past summer, and I had a very hard time trying to put the freshmen into classes that are actually going to count towards their degree plans because of how our registration works. And I know for myself, when I was coming into UT, I took like 10 AP courses in high school, but I haven't petitioned for the credit yet. So I paid for that later on, petitioning for it, and I still couldn't register with like priority because it's on like our seniority basis. So I took like, I think I only took 9 hours my freshman year that were actually relevant to my degree plan. So I feel like that's like a big waste of tuition money, and it really discourages the four-year graduation rate thing. And I'm paying for tuition and the petition credit. So I think, like, I don't know how much you address the registration process, if there's any way to kind of mold the course offerings so that freshmen have a better chance of getting into classes that actually matter to them. It's just a concern I have.
Great points, great points. And yes, we, in terms of our reorganization, this is not going to help you, but in terms of organizing around the future, we now have the registrar's office, financial aid, the provost's office, academic affairs, all organized together to work on these efficiencies. These are things that pertain directly to the work that we're trying to do for the four-year graduation.
And also another thing, I know that part of the reason why people want to stay for more than 4 years is to bring up their GPA. And I know like that, although I don't have a low GPA or anything, but that's something I've considered doing just to maximize my GPA. But I know like everyone's discouraging over four-year graduation rates now, so I don't know what I'm gonna do now. But we'll see. And like I know that because I already took so many AP courses in high school, there were classes that I guess are recommended to freshmen that are easier for us to take. But I couldn't really take those, so I think my academic advisor thought that I would be okay in harder classes, but you know, adjusting from a different state into this big university, like it was kind of hard for me in freshman year, but I mean I got over it. But like I thought maybe there's a way to encourage academic advising where it's not so much, oh, you know, you did so well in high school, so you must be okay, like, doing this your freshman year.
Another great point. And really, the whole issue of college readiness and being prepared to get in, both in terms of the scale and the size and the kind of culture of this great big university, and taking courses that really do prepare you for what it's going to take to perform at levels that you want to when you get here. We're working really hard on that.
I know that we're over time, so to be respectful of people's time, because I think some have commitments, so we have one more question.
Where and when is the next TPAC meeting, and is it open to the public?
The TPAC is an advisory committee. The meetings are not open to the public. We're an advisory committee to the president. What we will be doing is, after each meeting, staying behind, or the last few minutes of the meeting, staying behind, and the Texan has asked for access to all the committee members to talk about, presumably, what we've been talking about. I think Viviana and her colleagues will be there to report what we're talking about.
I don't trust like the media. Will y'all make the minutes of the committee meetings available?
The materials that the committee reviews and discusses, just as the materials that we presented here, are posted shortly after the meetings on our website.
And another thing, you work with your CTPAC committees, because what we want to do going forward with this, with the student committees, is to try to have communications back and forth with the TPAC committees, so that we use that information to have information coming back and forth into the students. We want you to know as much as we can have you know as we go through this process. So reach out and find your CTPAC committees, the chair of your CTPAC committees, and that'll help you work through the process of staying linked with our student leaders, so they will be maximally informed about what you think and what other students think as we work through this process in our committee.
The CTPACs will continue to have open forums. If you want to just drop by after meeting, I can definitely pass you on to the right person for your CTPAC. We have CTPAC roundtable meetings that both Natalie and I sit in, and we hear everything that CTPAC leaders are saying, and we bring it back to TPAC. So the lines of communication are definitely there, and we'd be happy to take any of your considerations or concerns.
As a working class student, it's hard to go to all these committee meetings where it's just recommendations that are going to go to other administrators. But I mean, I'll try. I'll try to.
Lee, I can definitely give you my email address too, if that's easier at all for communication.
Well, we very much appreciate everybody here spending the hour and a half with us and taking the time to give us feedback. Thank you.